Relationships are everything. We know this is true. Family and friends, people and animals, the soil, the air, the water and sun. Our mission is to help people reconnect with the most important place relationships happen, your home. We believe that every house, no matter how big or small, can be productive, beautiful, and restorative. We believe by healing relationships within our home, we can heal the world.
What is cultural capital? What and where is your local village and how do you interact with it? Where do you go to grow and use your skill sets? Those that can be seen and those that are not visible.
These tangible and intangible skill sets, like your taste in music, art and fashion, and the wide variety of life experiences you carry with you everywhere you go, are called social assets. These social assets give you power. They help you and your village achieve goals and success without necessarily needing financial wealth.
One of the most interesting things about these social assets is that they have nothing to do with wealth or income or any other financial measure. Together, they form something called cultural capital.
Let's check this one. You know, at school, I always got called Princess Leia because I always wore my hair in buns.
Really?
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about cultural capital with a good friend of mine, Susanne Engelhard. Well, I say good friend. We met about a year ago now when she came up from Samford Valley. She runs the Samford Valley Edible Garden Trail. So today we're going to be chatting with her about how that project got off the ground and, you know, how it's going now and what's coming up in the future.
So if you missed it, we did share a couple of weeks ago, I shared that interview. So it's really good to watch and because Susanne interviewed you in the back garden here. So
yes.
Go and have a look at that YouTube. It's linked. We might link it even to this.
Yes, absolutely. Hello. Hi. Can you see me? Can't hear you. Just a minute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, now we can hear you.
Is that background okay?
Yeah,
we're just admiring your pictures in the background.
Yeah.
We love the one
Looks like a moon.
I'm trying to point the one with the moon on it.
Oh yeah. We've got 3 alpacas now, which are just beautiful, and like 3 alpacas and 2 sheep, and then we've got some chickens. But like the whole process, like I go in there, feed them, let them out, and water go, just like it's a 45-minute routine, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Alpacas. That would be fun.
Somebody asked me the other day if I would ever get alpacas. Was that you?
No.
You asked me that?
No.
Who was that? It was like a really like existential kind of questions. Would you ever get alpacas?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. Would I get alpacas?
Yeah, and I think, are they good like for not mountains? I know you're not on a mountain, but
Mountains. It's like I'm on this stick.
like, you know, like with goats are good for.
Yeah, well, they come from the Andes. They're probably even more mountainous than goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
I thought about it for ages, and because we don't have a lot of land here, it's sort of 3.5 acres, but it's just like a management kind of thing. Like I just wanted something to eat the grass, but there's not enough room. Like I did try, everyone said it's not big enough for a cow, but I did try getting a couple of the Dexter cows, the small ones, but they ate it up straight away, and we were just paying for food. And I went, yeah. Okay, anyway. But I didn't want goats. I knew they were going to get out, and I kept coming back to alpacas, but I visited them a few times and like some farms, and anybody I visited, honestly, the alpaca people were like weird. Like they just, I didn't connect with any of them.
Oh, I was going to say, was that your prerequisite? That every
we too.
It sort of was, because it was like the alpacas were really standoffish, but then the people were standoffish. And I was trying to work out, like, well, I've got young kids, everything I read said that they're not animals that you can pat and, you know, that kind of thing. But I was like, well, I don't want them to not engage with us. And so I went to like 3 different places, but I just kind of kept circling back to it. And then eventually I just met somebody. I went to his place and they were really friendly. And they had these beautiful alpacas, and he said, oh, yeah, it just depends on whether you've raised them well. And
like any animal, yeah.
Yeah, and then basically within like a week or so, he was relocating some from some farms. He was sort of where they didn't have food. And anyway, he matched us to 3 that had been halter trained.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's 3 boys, 3 weathers, which is what we wanted because we just want them as pets. They're the sweetest things, and we can put a halter on them and the girls walk them around.
Oh, that's so cool. We've actually got an alpaca farm in our region, and it's you know, like people go and visit the alpaca farm, and they're really friendly.
Well, I had the stereotypical perspective of alpacas. They spit and they've got attitudes and stuff. And then at a Christmas fair down at the you know, where the Whalebones, the whole what is that place at the Breakwater, yeah. They had a mum that had just given birth to a baby, and something about their eyes, they're like liquid brown eyes, and their quietness, and they just look so,
just drew you right in.
I was just like, yeah, I think I like alpacas now.
Yeah.
Well, we might get into the interview then. Welcome this morning, Susanne. It's really nice to see you again. I think it was about 6 months ago, maybe, that we saw, or more than that I last saw you.
I think it was October.
Yeah, it was October. So
Yeah.
it's getting closer to a year.
Yes, and there's a lot been happening in your world down in Samford Valley. So just quickly, you are a part of the Samford Valley Edible Garden Trail, and that's sort of how we met, you know, a year ago. You came up as a part of your tour, but in this region. What is the Samford Valley Edible Garden Trail? It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, yeah. Okay, well, what is it? Well, it's an idea. It's an idea that is still evolving. However, it's an idea that started with, there's so much to it. So it started with a vision that I had of how could we share information about growing food amongst local people in my area, and share information in a way that wasn't about reading a book or getting your knowledge that way, but actually that sharing of information about actually speaking to another gardener, speaking to a neighbour, finding out what grows in our area, what are the tips and tricks that they use, you know, how do they deal with certain pests, like that sort of knowledge. You know, for me, that was the knowledge that I felt was kind of missing, you know, with growing food in your own backyard. That in the past we would have witnessed, you know, parents and grandparents growing food, and you can learn that knowledge, you know, just osmosis, you know, you learn it by seeing it. But by not having that opportunity, I felt like there was sort of this disconnect. And so I wanted to do something, well, how could we sort of come up with a project that would share this information? And so the idea started that, well, what if we had like an open garden day? And I'd heard of these before, but I'd never heard about the idea of an open garden day that was about edible gardens. But what if we could have this open garden day and people could come and visit each other's gardens and talk to the garden host and ask questions? And that's basically where the idea, that was the seed. That's where it started.
That's awesome. Right. And we find that here too, because we're in the tropics. So much of the information online and all of that is all about, you know, growing in colder climates, things like that. So that rings true to us as well. And I love that you were able to see that, and that having that disconnect is definitely, we're trying to create it for our children, so it's normal, but it's like it skipped that generation, that knowledge. Yeah.
And it's also, I found so overwhelming, I have to say, that when I looked things up and I would read things, like even getting chickens, for example, I read about getting chickens. Now, I actually had chickens growing up as a kid, so at least that made it easier. I can't imagine what it was like if I hadn't had chickens. But then there's been this big gap as an adult, no chickens. And then I decided I wanted them. And so I started to read and look on YouTube and all sorts of things. And overwhelmed by information, totally overwhelmed, and also overwhelmed by the products.
Completely.
The sort of expectation, you need to have this kind of coop or this kind of coop, or be careful of snakes here or this or that, and trying to make sense of all of that, and also make sense of it, and then this juggle around cost. Everything was like, wow, this is just going to add up, and what is it? I don't want to buy the wrong product. And I remember there was this actual point before I got chickens, which is now, probably 7 years ago, something like that, where I thought I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just gets overwhelming. It's just like, I'm just not even going to try. Yeah.
Hard. I can't do it.
You're getting into brown thumb mode. We call it the brown thumb mindset, where I can't make this work. I'm useless at this or whatever.
Well, it wasn't even from trying. It was just from not even getting going. And the only thing that got me across the line was that I remembered that we had chickens as a kid.
Wow.
And I just remembered thinking, we just had chickens running around. My parents didn't do any of this. And that got me across the line. And then I just worked it out.
Right? Yeah, all the products definitely complicate things.
I just worked it out. And so I guess that example for me, whether it's chickens or it's veggie gardens, that's what I'm talking about. It's that cutting through that noise, just to be able to actually speak to a human person, a neighbor, and say, hey, how can you grow strawberries in this area? How did you grow them?
Yeah.
And that to me was just is the best way of sharing information.
Yeah. So we're talking about culture today. That's what we're really trying to drill down into. So you at this stage were isolated sort of on your own, in your own home. Like, had you been gardening or anything at all? Where were you at in the gardening phase or the household production phase when you started thinking about this?
I was gardening. I had my own little veggie patch in this area. But when I had the idea, I wasn't connected in with the community.
Right.
Yeah. We'd moved up from Sydney now, about 6 years ago, something like that. And so I'd set my garden up and I'd started to, sort of get feelings into the community. But I hadn't joined any garden groups. Other than my children were still young, so they weren't at school yet either. So I didn't have that community yet. But I guess the community I did have were young parents.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this idea, and that was this critical thing. That's why the idea actually sat with me for a number of years before I did anything, because it wasn't something that I felt I could get off the ground on my own. And I didn't know where to start with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until, a few years passed, and as my children got a little bit older as well, and I started to feel that I could get involved a little bit more. And I went along to a group. Somebody put a post up on one of our community notice boards saying...
On Facebook? On Facebook?
On Facebook. It was just, like a community notice board Facebook group saying... would anybody like to get together to have a talk about some sustainability options that we could do in our area?
Yeah, okay.
And I went along, and there were about 8 of us there.
Yeah.
We just threw around different ideas and different things.
Yeah.
And I used that as this opportunity to say, hey, I've had this idea for a while. I don't know how to get it off the ground, but this is what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And it was just that process of verbalizing it.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And meeting with like-minded people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, although that wasn't the group that ended up forming to form the trail, that group decided to set up a Facebook group called Sustainable Samford, which was just a meeting point of ideas.
Right.
And we set that group up. And then the first thing as we put the idea in is I put a post up saying, hey, I've got this idea. Would anyone like to do it? And somebody responded. And then that started it.
Yeah.
So what made you think like that it would catch on in your community? Had you sort of got, because we all sort of talk to people and that sort of thing, had you been picking up from others the interest or, you know, the lack of that sort of thing? Or did you just kind of go with a gut feeling that people would catch on?
That's an interesting question. No, I didn't get feeling from other people. I went with a gut feeling.
Right.
And maybe it was just the gut feeling because it's what I would want to do.
Sure.
Like
You had a
I would
passion
want to
for
go
it.
and look at gardens.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that was,
That's similar to what we sort of say, you know, with the homesteading school, is we're wanting to be the kind of people that we wanted 10 years ago when we first started.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like we were looking for those people to ask questions or to, you know, have interviews with amazing people who had, you know, trekked that trek before.
Yeah.
So just trying to be that person for the next person. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just quickly, like you met with the sustainable guys, and then how long did it take you from that point to, like, for the idea to take off, for people to really grab a hold of it? Because when you came and visited me, you'd had quite amount of videos. Like, so this is how you do it. You'll go and you'll go to someone's garden, and just with an iPhone, just a normal iPhone, you'll record yourself with a friend, will record you chatting to the person. And then you put it up on your Facebook page. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we've got two parts to the trail. I need to cough, excuse me. It's not COVID.
We have a common cold still.
Yeah, that's right, the common cold. Yeah, so there's actually two parts. So let me answer first. How quickly did it take off? The answer was really fast.
Right.
It took off quickly. However, we had the foundations in place.
Right.
So by foundations, I mean that we set ourselves up. I went to a local group here. It's the Samford Progress Association. They run the local newspaper, and it's a not-for-profit group. And I went along to a meeting, and I needed a very small amount of money just to set up a logo and a few other things. And they agreed to give us that money. That significant, I guess, support for me is what started the project, because to me that there was something about that went, yeah, okay, this is an actual project. We've now got a commitment. This is something we're going to do.
So, sorry, just quickly, saying you were with somebody else by this stage, or not quite?
No, it was still me at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me, myself, and
I had, this was in that beginning phase where I put the hand up. Someone had said they were interested. But then in parallel to that, I was like, okay, well, I'll go to this meeting. I'll find out, can we get some money? And then they said yes. And so I sort of brought that back to that person. And then we said, okay, what shall we do? And this was the beginning of 2020. And so this is why it's important to talk about this split of what happened, because the original goal was to have an open day, like have one day and we have gardens open and everybody go and visit it. But when we started to actually plan this event in February, it went from the two of us to actually four of us. So this other person, Christine, brought in two other people, and we became the organising group. This was also at the time where we went straight into lockdown.
Yeah, I remember that. You guys came just after we'd finished our lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'd literally started going, let's do it. And within a week, things were happening. And I said to Christine, look, our plan was to hold the open day in May. And I just said, I've just got a feeling this is going to go sour here. What shall we do? And we made a decision then, which I'm so glad about. And it was to go forward.
Wow.
And yeah, and what happened when we went to that Progress Association meeting, one of the things is that we got feedback from people when I presented this project. And I remember there was this particular one where this older gentleman said to me, this is a really great idea. You've only got a few months to organise it. Why don't you just plan this year and run it next year? And I just remember when he said that, I just thought like I was so deflated. I just thought, well, why? Like I would be in the same position in a year's time than I am now.
Right.
You know, like and for me, it was about, if there was enthusiasm, I wanted to take action and see where it took me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't want to just plan something in some theory and have meetings and, you know, and I've since had other people who had that meeting who remembered that comment and said to me that we are so glad that you didn't listen to that.
Oh,
Yeah,
sweet.
wow.
And I think too, in that moment, because you're still in those sort of early stages of, you know, it's always, in hindsight, it was a great idea. It did take off and all that sort of things, but you were obviously in that stage where it may or may not work, and, you know, how much effort am I going to put in, and maybe it's all for nothing and things like that. So I can imagine how that comment would have been a little bit, you were in that vulnerable stage, it would have been hard to take. And yeah,
totally. And it is, when you put yourself out there, there is that vulnerable state, and there is that, because and it's an easy state for like people to comment about what all the problems that might happen. And I felt like my role was to hold that space, actually, and be like, you know what, I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but we could do something. And I just wanted to do something. And I know that to do something, I need enthusiasm and momentum. And the first thing that stops that for me is to think that we would have to plan something for a year or sit around and talk about it. Like, I just wanted action. I wanted
to do it. Yeah.
Just wanted to do it.
The fun stuff.
Yeah.
And how many people, you know, in that stage, I find last year, you know, people were right in that, I guess, a little bit of fear mode.
Flight or fright.
Yeah.
They were just like,
yeah, you know, everyone
get away
was
from it all,
wanting to learn how to make sourdough and you know, plant some things and that sort of thing. So it was like strike while the iron was hot. You know, people were more than ever interested in how do I grow my own food and that sort of thing. So if I feel like, it sounds like if you had waited, you know, may have missed it. You know, that. So
and so what we ended up doing is, because of the lockdown, we ended up planning, sort of tweaking what we were going to do. And instead of doing an open day, we did videos, as you said. So we still did it in May, and that was, timing was perfect. The lockdown lifted, and we basically went out and did the garden tours ourselves and videoed ourselves walking around, talking to the garden host. And we just posted it up on a Facebook page and a YouTube page, and did lots of promotion in our area, in our local newspaper. And instead of having it as a one-day event, we made it go over sort of 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of May. And each day we visited a different garden. So we had 14 gardens, something like that. And it was just amazing. It's like people came out of lockdown and we had this community project, and we just did it. We didn't know, we worked it out as we went along. We figured out how to, you know, work it with our phones and the mics and uploading. It was just, we just worked it out as we went along, stumbled our way through, and it totally went off. We had so much support and people loved it. And that's why then after that 2 weeks, we ended up continuing it. We decided that we would still, like, once a fortnight, we'd just go and visit another garden. And that's what we did for the rest of the year. And then that's when we came up and we visited you as part of that project. And so that got us to the end of the year. But then now in 2021, we sort of sat down in February and said, well, what shall we do? Shall we let the people loving the online stuff, and we've got people following us around Australia and overseas. And also one of the great things that came from it is we've had a number of people, like I think probably now 4 or 5 people, contact us and say, hey, we'd love to do something similar in our area. Can you give us some tips? And so we've been able to
have you say things like that. I thought it was just cold in here, but no, I think I love hearing that. And you know, I love how you had that major challenge and you overcome it, and it turned out to be even better. And even though the open garden day would have been amazing for the people in your local area, you're able to reach so many more people now because you've taken it online. And maybe if that hadn't have happened, you know, you sort of made that challenge into something even better, and now you have more of a reach to people and to be inspiring other people to do it in their area. I mean, that's what the cultural capital is all about, isn't it? You know, so many people, oh, I wish I lived it in your area. And as much as I encourage people to come here, because I'm like, seriously, it's amazing. I love how what you're doing and how you're sharing what in this interview, it can inspire someone else to create this, you know.
To activate it in their own community as a model.
Yeah, that you were just a everyday person growing a garden, and, you know, you were able to create something really special. Yeah.
And that's actually what we've seen. We've seen now not just us doing this, but coincidentally at the same time that we started our edible trail in 2020, they also started one in Sydney and they started one in Hobart in the same year. So we just sort of worked in parallel. There had been one the year before in Blue Mountains, which I think might be the first one. And I think the Sydney one came from that. I don't know if the Hobart one came from that or started on its own, but ours sort of started on its own, but we all sort of found out about each other.
Like, hey, you're doing what we're doing. And I feel that it's a little bit similar to us here. It's, you know, we're taking a different approach, but it's that similar feel of just bringing people together, surrounding, you know, with food. We did a farm tour on the weekend, and so there were so many comments about, you know, like having just things that you can grow only in our area instead of wasting our time trying to grow cabbages and cauliflower. Like, what can we
Wendy was growing cabbages.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
We had garden envy.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's right. Yeah, you start to find out. It's like we sort of found that we were where we were sort of fitted in then on this next level, on this sort of bigger level, like, yeah, which is, yeah, more around Australia. And so, and then since then the Adelaide one started, well, they did one and they had contacted us beforehand, and some people from Perth contacted us and we connected them together, and they've had a meeting, and there have been a couple of other ones in Queensland that have contacted us. So we'll see what they end up doing. But that's a really beautiful thing that kind of came out of it, which was, you know, not part of the original idea. The original idea starts small, but it, you know, it has this sort of capacity to grow. But as I was saying, what we ended up doing then this 2021 is that we have backed off a little bit from the online videos, even though we will still do that. The only reason we've backed up is a bit of a backed off as a workload issue. I think as trying to work out a bit of a balance. But what we did is we did our open day. We did that on May 16th this year, and we said, let's just go with our idea now and see what happens. And so we ended up having this open garden day. It was a one-day event. We opened up 8 gardens in our area and sold tickets. The tickets were very cheap. The kids were free. It was $10 for an adult, and subsequent adults were $5. So it was not an expensive event, but ticketing was very useful. It allowed us to have an idea of numbers, and that was very important for us. And we had this, I can't even describe, we had the most amazing day. We sold out. We could have sold so many more tickets, but we sold out because we capped it, because we just thought we had 1,300 people coming. And
whoa,
we said, this is
that's crazy.
We want to make sure this works. Okay? And we had volunteers. We had to put a big call out, because we had basically the basic setup was the garden host would be there. It was from 9:30 to 3:30. They'd be in their garden to answer questions. And each garden also had a couple of time slots where they could run a tour. And so you could join the tour if you wanted to have a personalized tour, or otherwise you would just turn up and you would wander around the garden. So it was very flexible like that.
So I'm just trying to get a picture in my head of how that looked. So did people just get like the addresses of those? So obviously they were in different, you know, spaces and they could just drive to and have those times, and is that how it worked?
Yeah, we didn't, to respect people's privacy, we didn't publicize the addresses. So we needed to have sort of an extra step, which is you bought your ticket And then 48 hours before the event started, we then sent people a trail guide, which then had all of the addresses so that people could go to. And people, it was self-directed. So, and on the trail guide, it had a little blurb about, you know, the different, you know, aspects of each garden. So you could choose, you know, the 3 or 4 that you might like to visit the most, right? Because 8's unrealistic in a day. And then you just drove there, showed your ticket at the front gate and wandered around and had a look. Or if there was one that you were particularly interested in and saw, okay, there's a tour at 10 o'clock, you timed it so you're there at 10 o'clock and then you got a tour by the garden home.
And was there sort of smaller house block gardens and then bigger, you know, acreages? Was it a mix?
Yeah, we had a mix. It was great. We had right from a suburban back property that had the whole backyard and front yard fully converted into a growing space. We had, you know, we had a food forest, a 10-year-old food forest on display. We had a property that was all growing on a slope with, you know, sort of mixed plantings, but all using swales. We had a permaculture designed garden. We had another garden that was sort of a tree changes garden, we called it, because they'd come out from the city. It was a new garden from COVID. You know, so each garden was very unique like this. So you could identify with, you know, we had one that was just had wicking beds and raised beds. So, you know, you could target the thing that you were interested in, you know, and there were also bees, you know, there were things that were on display that people could see.
So with the participants, how many months lead up did they have to get ready for the event?
6 weeks.
Whoa. Okay. Because I found we've done farm tours and permaforces and stuff like that. So permaforce is like a working bee. No, I laugh because people do a permaforce before the permaforce, like they actually tidied their place up before anyone even came.
When you've got a cleaner coming through and you're like, come on, kids, we've got to clean up. The cleaner's coming.
Yeah.
So I found, you know, when you're preparing for something, it's really motivating. And we find this even with Instagram, we're chatting about, you know, our farms now that we're sort of online and telling our story, it's really motivating for the people who are actually participating to tidy their gardens up and get them up to scratch and make them, you know, it's not a bad thing in itself for people who are presenting.
Yeah. So what was your question? Are you wondering whether people really tidied up a lot?
Yeah. Did you find it really, like, people really got into it? Obviously they did if they were going to present. Were they under a lot of pressure? Were they happy to do it? How did they find it?
Right. They definitely tidied up. I'm sure people tidied up and they did their best because their properties looked amazing. But they only had a short period of time. It really was only about 6 weeks, you know, like for us to sort of we pulled pretty much this whole project together within. Not
enough time to really freak out about it.
No. It was like they could plant a few seedlings and then those ones might have grown up a bit, but
right,
you know, they were not, you know, they were people. And what was one of the things people said, oh, we'd had more time, it would, you know, they'd be bigger, but
it sounds like it was more authentic because it's like yes, they tidied up, but that's what their place really looks like. It's not just this display. This is this working space that is like this.
And this was something that we've spoken about the whole time. Every time we've done a tour, I've had the same thing said to me. So this has been fascinating. Every person I contact says to me, my garden is not good enough to show.
Yeah.
And people will often say, oh, maybe like later, or if I do this or do that. And it's everybody thinks it's not okay to show. And I say to them, we are not after a display garden. What we are wanting to do is encourage people to grow food. Okay. And so they need to see, and they want to see what a real garden looks like. And that's been, you know, our approach the whole way along. And, you know, that's more important. And everybody then took that on. And once I, you know, responded like that, people were like, oh, okay, you can come over. And people's gardens are amazing. You know, like, there's this strange idea of it needing to look, you know, like something, but that's not what people are there for. People's gardens looked incredible because there's so much love in these gardens and they're real. And then people could connect with it and say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
how did you do this? Or what?
I think, Suzanne, that was one of the things that struck me the most in our first interview and conversation, was that I could see a steely determination in yourself to keep it relatable to people. And that really struck me, and probably in some ways inspired me, because it was 6 months later that I started the homesteading school channel up, with very much that at the foundation, is that we have to make sure that we stay relatable to people, because everyone needs to know they can garden no matter who they are.
And that's why our slogan is every house is a homestead, and I love that you had just a suburban block, because people are like, oh, well, I don't have land or something big, so I can't call myself a homesteader or be a homesteader. And it's like, I love that you were showcasing those people that just, smashed through those ideas and went, well, okay, I've got this amount, or I can't dig into the ground because I'm renting or something, so I'm just going to put wicking beds. And there's those challenges, and it's just like, well, it doesn't matter about those excuses, you can overcome them. This person has, and here's this example.
That's right. And one of the people that we had was a renter. This is in one of our earlier videos. It was one of our most popular videos. People loved seeing it. And we asked just really basic questions. Like I asked this question of the lady who was renting, and I said, so when you move, I said, do you, you take your garden beds with you, obviously. And I said, do you take your soil? And I remember she hesitated for a moment, and then she said, I know this sounds really weird, but she said, we take our soil. And she said, it's a really big deal. We have to get, a ute, whatever. But she said, I've nurtured and grown and composted this soil. It's like it's valuable to us. And I just said, that's amazing, right? And so many people have since said to me, they really connected with what she said.
Wow.
That made sense. And it allowed them to, picture that they could do this.
I can do that too, yeah.
And
I think that is one of the most important points of anything that we're talking about in this period of time, is that, people have known from ancient cultures and ancient times that it's the soil that holds the true wealth. It's inside the soil. And if you can have a piece of soil, whether it's a pot on your veranda this size or, numerous garden beds, it's that soil in itself that can produce for you, food and possibly an income if you then value add to the food that you're producing out of that. And if you can get soil in wherever you're living, that's where all of that goodness comes from, and I love that point. That's such
I love that she took it with her, because you really put so much love, and it's it takes a long time to really put that in. It's very slow. I remember I built I was sort of adding to this gravel basically, and over it was probably about 3 years I just kept adding, and I had maybe 10 centimeters, and I would add to it every 3-6 months. And I still only had, this 10 centimeters of soil on top. I couldn't really even put a lettuce in because it needed more. So, that took so long and so much effort. So I could imagine, I'd take my soil too.
Yeah.
Good on her.
So I just wanted to ask you, so right now everyone's just going, oh my God, Susan's so amazing. I could never do what she's done. But I've got a question here, what skill sets of your own and then other people did you find really helped to get this project up off the ground and going? Give us your top 3.
Okay, so that's a good point. So where do I fit in this? I think it's really important that anything like this starts with an idea. And I feel as though there's probably 2 or there's 3 roles that I play in this. One was that the idea was mine. Okay, and it is important to have confidence to put an idea forward. The idea on its own would not have got off the ground though, okay, if it hadn't been that other people had connected in with me, right? But then once the project got rolling, there needs to be somebody that is the center of it, that kind of holds it together. And I guess I ended up being that person. And so that was critical of having that. And I feel that
Ahead.
now, you know,
Like,
like
ahead.
that, yeah, that's right. Without that, that seems to be a critical part of it. Okay. So I guess that's the role that I'm seeing myself in now. I'm sort of holding that. But the actual project now, it really, and I want to be very clear, it really is not, that's the role that I play. But there's absolutely no way this is a community project, right? There are a core group of people who if we talk about the open day, because that was an enormous effort, those 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks before the open day, there was a huge amount of effort to get that off the ground. There were a core group of 4 of us who were doing the grunt work of it. You know, there was a big administrative component, answering questions, emails, ordering flyers, you know, promotions, things like that. And it really,
I remember you saying that it got very,
it was very hectic.
Yeah.
And I'd like next year, because we're going to do this as an annual thing, to manage that better, because that was a big load on a very small number of us. But it required those people who were prepared to down tools and spend half a day every day for a few weeks to really get it off the ground. But then there was this next layer out, who were the people who opened their gardens. And to answer your earlier question, they were so enthusiastic to open it. I thought we would have a lot of problems getting people to open their gardens. And I think if we had started that way, we would have struggled, right? Because when I initially contacted people, you know, in 2020, besides people saying, oh, my garden's not good enough, the next thing they would say to me is, oh, I don't have to open it, do I? People were really nervous about it.
Yeah.
But I think that was
privacy and that sort of stuff.
I think the fact that we did the videos and people saw that and we'd created this culture already, that seemed to just disband that, which meant that when we came to the open day, people were willing to open their gardens. And I was like, wow, okay. So that was easy. So we had these people who had this commitment because they were going to have strangers on their property. They were doing their gardens up, and, you know, so that was sort of that layer. And then there was this next layer out where we called for volunteers in the community because we needed numbers. We worked out that we had to have somebody at the, you know, at the entrance to the garden, 1 as a minimum, but preferably 2 people who would check tickets as people arrived, answer any questions, things like that. You know, people had to do the COVID sign in. And
times 8, because you had 8, you know, so that's 16 people. Yeah,
that's right. So there's 16 people straight off. But then we went, well, we'll do like a morning time slot and an afternoon time slot. So we've doubled that. And so this then became something where I put a post out onto the wider community to say, hey, we've got this project we want to get going. Would anybody be willing to come and volunteer and man the entrance, you know? And so that was very interesting because you're then asking people, you know, you sort of this layered sort of effect. To pull that off, we needed all of that. And then we probably needed one more layer, which was this support of the community, where we got sort of this administrative or financial kind of support. Like we got some sponsorship from our local Bendigo Bank, which paid, you know, signage and things like that. But we also then had a local community radio who would interview me. And so, you know, there was this support in the structures of our community, I guess you could say, that realized, hey, an event like this will benefit our whole community. And they were prepared to welcome us in and say, yes, you can do this event.
I can't even imagine how that would have felt for you, like that one little idea, and, you know, the old man at the that meeting, you know, to then see all of these, and not just people benefiting, but, you know, whenever you volunteer something like that, you get all these, you know, good little feelings inside of you that you created all of, you know, I know it was you know, all of those people coming together, but that idea started like that. And then for it to see it branch out to all of that and benefit all of those people, it would have been such a buzz.
Yeah, that was interesting because in that week, just before the week before the actual open day, and I was I was feeling pretty overwhelmed and there was a lot going on. And my husband said something really interesting to me. And it was along those lines where he sort of turned to me and he looked and he just said, like, don't you see, like, there's not many people who get to have an idea actually expressed like this.
Mm.
And
That's goosebumps again.
it was such
That's
an
beautiful.
insightful thing for him to say that it really, I stopped short and I looked at him and I was able to pivot because I was really in this space of like, oh, I'm overloaded. There's so much to do. How do I? And I kind of looked at him and just saw this whole other perspective and I realized what he was saying. And I just went, wow. Like I saw the bigger picture and thought, gosh, I'd forgotten. This did start with an idea years ago. And I'm actually going to get to see this idea played out in the world because all these other people have come on board. I've got to see my idea played out. And it was an absolute, like my heart was so full. I couldn't believe, I just thought, what a gift that was. I would have missed that actually if he hadn't said it, or you haven't said it just now as well, that I would have picked it up when you said it, but I would have missed that because I was so just kind of in the running motion of it.
Yeah.
But that was an absolute gift to me to think that's what I got back. I mean, I got so much back from this, but on top of that, I got this back from my community, the opportunity to see an idea of mine played out in life.
I think what what I can hear, what he did for you was to bring you into that present moment. Because if we are doing all of these wonderful things and if you don't stop in that present moment and just sit in it and really, really just soak it up and enjoy it, then what's the point? You know, it's all busy work, but being able to be that, you know, and what a gift that he was able to bring you to that present moment and remind you, hey, you know, enjoy that while it's there.
Yeah. Susanne, what do you think your idea, why did people grab it so hard? What about your idea tapped into something inside of people? What do you think it was?
I think, particularly that first year where because there's been the two parts to it, I actually feel like the reason people loved it was that it was action-based.
Right.
I actually think it was the fact that something got off the ground that was fun, community connected, that people valued. Like these people obviously all have we all have a similar value in wanting to grow food or support local produce. But it was something about, I think that they were just able to get involved in something that wasn't really hard and it brought a lot of reward. And so even the people who like watching the videos, I think they loved that it was just grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
People really loved that it was local. And it was positive. It had a positive energy to it the whole way.
Yeah.
And that was big. A lot of comments about how it's just been a really positive feel. Like nobody's, you know, trying to make some big business out of it. Nobody's trying to sell something out of it. It's really about community and sharing.
Genuine.
Yeah.
And have you had feedback since those things on, you know, people saying like, you know, now I have a garden because I went to this tour or because I watched this video? Have you had some feedback from your community of, you know, like the 1,300 people? Did it really inspire people?
Yeah.
Sure, that did, but
what's interesting is the best, we had written feedback and we get people email us, but the best feedback that I like are the ones that we discover by accident. So what I mean by this is the last garden tour that we did was, we call it the Wicking Bear Garden, and it's a local gentleman who's built his whole garden through wicking beds as a water saving, or one of the reasons is a water saving approach. And when we arrived at his garden, I saw all of these food grade white buckets growing potatoes in them. And Kerry was with me, one of my the other organisers, and she looked, and we both sort of looked together, and then we said to Lee, "Oh, are these, you know, buckets?" And we just sort of pointed at them, and he said, "Oh yeah, I got those from, you know, that tour that you did of that Tullamore farm place where he was growing turmeric and potatoes in buckets." And so there he was doing the same thing.
Awesome.
And
yeah.
I've had that happen a few times, and that's been the best, because that's like, wow, they actually,
people are actually listening or watching, or
they did it. And so that and so we've got a couple of other things that have kind of grown from it, actually, because this is why, you know, when you said in the beginning, what is this? And I said it's sort of this, it's not a one project, it's a group of us volunteers who are managing our time and our ideas and it's just sort of growing, and we're allowing it to grow in a way that it wants to, but also that we have the capacity to do it, you know. But what it looks like we're sort of going to do, hopefully, is we've got a lot of feedback from people that they would love to see it as a 2-day event. And so I think if we could pull that off next year and make it a 2-day event, that would be the goal, I think. And then that would bring so much more into the community as well, because suddenly you've got people coming from out of the area, they're staying overnight, they're experiencing, you know, the whole weekend, right? So that's one aspect of it. But this other second part of it is that because we charge money for the tickets, albeit not a lot of money, we've ended up with a little pot of money, right? Community money, which is really exciting. And so we got together as a group and said, what can we do? And we'd always said that, you know, the profits, you know, all the money here would go back into our local community to encourage community gardening. So that was always the intent and always what we said. And so we had this discussion, said, what can we do to sort of maximize, you know, scale this? What's the best thing that we can do? And kind of just threw out all these different ways, because we don't have an edible community garden in our area, but we've also got a lot of acreage, right? So it's sort of like, it's probably not the right thing for our area anyway. What could we do? But it looks like we've kind of come up with a good idea, and it's not off the ground yet, but we've been sending emails this week. We're trying to make it happen.
We're getting a sneak peek, are we?
We can have a sneak peek. So let's hope we pull it off. But this is how we made it run last time, is we just made it happen, right?
I get to reality.
Yeah, we just went, well, this is what we're doing. We just brought everybody in to make it happen. We met up this weekend, and we've decided that we're going to offer community grants to build community verge gardens.
Oh, wow.
And the idea would be that the homeowner then, so the grant would be, if we can do this, we're exploring the logistics around it, but it would be sort of a standardized raised bed probably design. You know, it's got to fit with council regulations when it's a verge garden. But we would sort of pay for the raised bed and compost and help initially kind of set things up. But it would be looked after by the resident, and it would be labelled. There'd be some signage saying, this is a community garden, please help yourself to the produce. But then you, as the homeowner, you're the one that's growing, you know, for yourself and for anybody who's walking past. And so straight away you solve the problem that some community gardens have about getting volunteers and getting people to manage it, because you've got one person managing one little plot, right? But we would give preference and hope to encourage where it would be not just one house, but you 2 or 3 together, or a street, like a cul-de-sac, something like that. So ideally, like, it could grow each year. So even when we do the open day next year, we would list that on one of our on the trail guide as go visit such and such street, because you can see there the community verge gardening that's growing there. And so each year, you know, we get some sales come in and we put it back to the community, and we had this vision of community verge gardening in our, because we've got a village here as well as acreage, you know, in our Samford Valley. So we've got these sort of, you know, all these different accommodation styles. And so that's where we're kind of heading with it. And to me, when we had this meeting on the weekend, we went, now that would fit.
Yeah.
Open day, then the money goes back in. And then you've got a whole nother layer of community getting involved who weren't involved before.
Yeah, it sort of like, instead of overwhelming someone with a big garden, it's like, well, could you just start with this small little bit? And it's not just you're a part of something, but this is all you need to manage, and it would welcome in, you know, so many more people. I love that. Love it.
And it's sort of like, it might be like 1 meter by 1 meter or something, you know, 1.5 meters, something like that. And but they could learn because their neighbours are doing it too. And maybe it might evolve from that, where somebody comes and, you know, we can form a group or something. They would show what we're planting now, like all those things could just naturally evolve. Like we don't need to work that out, but it's like another part of the community become part of the movement. And then you also get this other part of the community who are the people who are like walking by and go, well, what's this? Oh, wow, am I really allowed to pick this lettuce? It says on this sign it's a community garden, I can have it. I mean, how unusual is that in life?
Or it might be, you know, like someone who's elderly and just isn't able to garden anymore, and they still get fresh, you know, homegrown produce, or, you know, a mum that's just in her, you know, prime of like babies, and she doesn't have that space. So you're offering that homegrown food to people that maybe would miss out or have to buy it from the supermarket because they're just not in that stage of their life to be able to do it. So I love that idea.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. So my question was, with, you know, like, it's amazing for to hear this, and I really hope people who watch this get inspired to create something in their own area. I wondered, with the open garden days, did you actually film that? Did you make anything sort of online for people to watch that?
We did. We did some lives basically as we travelled around. I mean, the day flew by pretty quick, and
like a wedding, be like a day wedding.
Yeah.
It's huge. And so what we had a lot of people who were outside the area saying, are you going to do videos? So we didn't do any recorded ones and then put up later. That was sort of too much work. We just did some live Facebook lives, and so people followed along on the day.
Awesome.
But it did mean that those then didn't go up to YouTube or anything like that. But that was probably the most we could sort of manage at the time. And it was also kind of a secondary thing. I think I'll be a bit more organised for next year, because we didn't have our mics with us. We were just going for the phone. And so it was quite spontaneous. And I realised, had we had a mic, we could have, because I did a few random interviews as people were walking by, and the sound was not as good. Yeah. So that's some of the things that kind of learn.
Yeah, and I'm sure next time you could maybe, you know, look at someone who might be interested in doing that part of it, and you know, outsource that to someone who'd be able to be the, you know, the videographer or that sort of thing to follow you around. Yeah. So if people wanted to just like your Facebook page, so that next time when the trail's on, that they could then tune in and see and be a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably if you go to our website page and actually sign up to our newsletter, that will ensure that you'll get notified about it. Yeah. I think we've only sent one newsletter out, so your email inbox won't be bombarded, but we will certainly, at least you'll be in the loop. So yeah, the website is samfordediblegardentrail.com.au. And yeah, that's the same name to look us up on Facebook or YouTube as well.
Yeah, awesome. They can go back and have a binge on all of the awesomeness there.
Yeah.
So Suzanne, when are you going to come back up here again? You're probably super busy now.
I think, well, it's not so much super busy, but it's more that I think now it's about now probably, because this is a long-term thing now, I think. This year's been about trying to work out the balance and what's sustainable for us. And so I feel like next year we'll be in a really good place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because you've got children, you've got a family, you've obviously, you've got your farm, you get your alpacas, like you balance it, and we're the same, trying to balance. Some days we just have to sit it all down and just focus on that. Mostly farm life just forces you, when you've got a little lamb that needs feeding every 2 hours, and that has a way of taking precedent over different things, doesn't it? So you're trying to find that balance, within your life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then that balance for us between the open day and then the videos, and then between the core team, what do we need to keep this going without it being difficult, because that's always been a big thing I've said to people. We don't want this to be a burden for anybody, because once it's a burden, you lose volunteers.
Not sustainable.
It needs to be not sustainable. So I think a little bit more tweaking, because it was so intense the first half of this year. I definitely feel that I've let it go a little bit this second half. We've only done a couple of videos. And that feels right to me at the moment, because I've got quite a lot on in my own life happening. But I think it's also this learning phase, because we've decided now we've just decided we're going to do this verge gardening community part of it. So it's going to pick up again in October. And I would say then by the end of this year, I think for me, that'll bring the complete vision sort of together. And I'd say that when we sit down in February next year, we'll know what's kind of happening. We'll say, yeah, okay, now we know this is what we do. May is our open day. Then in October, it goes back to the community, the verge gardening, and we'll do X number of videos through there, and we'll find a way to balance it and make it sustainable, so that model just goes on like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I loved it, that trip up there. So maybe next year.
Just a holiday, maybe no work. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Susanne, for coming on with us today and sharing your incredible story. It really is so inspiring, and to hear that it's also happening in other cities around Australia also. Like, I didn't know that before I chatted with you today. So I think
that it's so successful as well.
Yeah.
That if someone has the idea to do this, you guys have in a way paved the way to say, like, it really is worth the effort.
Yeah.
People will respond, and that even just one person can start to create that, because I see this, all these little places all over Australia would just be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if I could add if I was asked one piece of advice to give somebody who wants to set it up, that I would just so love to be able to offer, is don't wait for it to be perfect before you start. Right? Don't wait for, like that older man who said, just plan it for a year and then do it. It was a life lesson for me to allow myself to be vulnerable, to be like out there on camera. And if you go back to the earlier videos, I watched the first few and I really cringed, because there I was and I was umming, and I thought, oh, I just, what am I doing? But I realized if I could step back from that, which I did, I sort of stepped back and thought, I'm seeing that. But what other people were seeing was enthusiasm and joy, and they loved it. And so I had to work through in the beginning there that it actually didn't matter that I was really imperfect in front of the camera, and that our sound wasn't spot on to start with. We worked that out as we went along. But I know that in other areas of my life or business, it's so easy to fall into, well, I've got to get this right before I launch it. And if it hadn't been for this being a community project, we only launched it because there were a group of us. And that is what made it work. And I just feel like, as a life lesson, I'm drawing on that all the time, because this tendency is always, I've got to get it right before I go out. And it wasn't the case.
We've had those moments.
We've had those.
It's like the theme about
near enough is perfect.
Yeah, just get in and do it. And I want the cringy videos. I want to look back and see, and I think people grow with you, you know, and I've heard of a lot of, you know, YouTubers or, you know, those sort of things, and they say, you know, that very similar thing in that they look back and you're like, but you're professional. And it's like, yeah, but go and have a look at the start and watch how awkward I was and watch how much I and stumbled or, and it's like just in those moments. So I think even when we were making it, we're like, yeah, these are those videos we're going to look back on.
It's just what it is.
But I thank you for saying that, because it's really encouraging for people.
And I think it's applicable to everything, like you said, Susanne. It's not just starting a new project, it's any project that you're working on. I think that's the theme of this whole entire interview really is, near enough is perfect, and just take action.
Even if you've just got cable ties. Build a fence.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really lovely meeting you too, Susanne. I didn't get pleasure last time.
And we'll say goodbye, and we'll talk to you again next time.
And thank you, and keep doing all your awesome work up there, and it feels really lovely to have this sort of connection with you up there north somewhere. Really love your work. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanne.
Thank you.
We'll see you again.
Bye.
Bye.